Hello there, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm just going to get going. There are still one or two more parents joining, but I'm conscious of time and I don't want to run over, so I'm going to get going. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining this meeting. For your information, it is being recorded, so that will be circulated after the event, and as will the PowerPoint. Anyway, so the purpose of this short meeting, and I am going to keep it to half an hour maximum, is to support you understanding your child's progress check. So Year 12 and 13 progress checks are looking ever so slightly different. The reason for that is because we're piloting a new look progress check with Year 12. So I'll talk about the difference as we go through. Year 12 parents, I would absolutely be interested in feedback at the end of this because we've spent a really long time thinking about these and we want to do them to be the best support for you and your students. And so I'd be interested in that. But firstly, I'm just going to start with a few quick introductions. So I'm conscious that there are some people new to Finham. And so in case anybody is not aware of these terms, a progress check is something that you will get once a term. A progress check is not a written report. It's just data. It will give you information about your child's grade, about their attendance, about their attitude to learning, things like that. We'll talk about what all of that means in a minute. It's just a quick snapshot, really, in terms of how they are doing. A report students will get once per year. That is a written report where teachers all write a bespoke comment, and there's much more generic information from each department as well about specific things that all the students should be doing. Parents' evening. For information, I get asked about this every year. We did a parents' survey last year. The conclusion overwhelmingly was that parents' evening should stay online, and so because of that, parents' evening is staying online. Last year, there were one or two parents who, for example, had a disability or something that meant they could not do that, and we arranged bespoke sessions for them. So if you have a medical reason or whatever that you cannot attend an online parents' evening, do let us know and we will accommodate you. But basically, parents' evening, each student gets one parents' evening event a year and they will be online. That is the sort of data info that you will be getting about your child throughout their time at Finham Park Sixth Form. So here are some key dates. I'm going to leave that there for a little while. You might want to take a photo of it because it's the key dates for this whole academic year, specifically in terms of data and reporting. Obviously, there are lots of key dates that are not on there. This is only data and reporting. So on there, you've got the dates of all the progress checks. You've got all the in-class and official assessments. You have got the parents' evenings and you have got the reports. So I'll just give you a minute there to have a look at that. You should see that that's quite well spaced out throughout the year. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance just to read through that. What you will see is that we are at the stage that children are receiving their first progress check of the academic year. So year 13, their first progress check was released yesterday. That was in mentor period. And year 12 are receiving their first progress check in mentor period on Monday. The reason we always release them in mentor period is so we can support the students. They can really understand what all the different numbers, letters, colours, shading means, etc., etc. And that's the purpose of this meeting as well. And that's why we're holding it now. So on your child's progress check, regardless of whether they are in year 12 or 13, for each subject, they will have an attitude to learning score. People who have had children at Finham have seen this for years, but whether you've ever exactly known what it meant or not, I'm not sure. So I'm going to go through that now. Attitude to learning takes into account lots of things. It takes into account effort, attitude, behaviour in lessons, specifically at sixth form, much more learning behaviour. We don't really have bad behaviour in lessons at post 16, but much more about learning behaviour. Is your child well equipped? Do they complete their classwork to the best of their ability? Do they do their homework? Now, a really important one at post 16, and people often forget about this, is independent study, background reading, additional questions, all that extra work that students are expected to do. Students very often complain that they haven't got the highest attitude to learning, even though they've done everything they're meant to do. and they don't realise that actually they need to do plenty of independent study and go above and beyond. So that's a real point to reinforce. We reinforce that basically every day at sixth form, but at home, that's a really good point to reinforce. Response to feedback, that's really important. If a student gets feedback and does not act on it frequently, then that shows that they're not doing everything they need to do. We take into account attendance and punctuality, interaction with extra support offered. So if students are offered support and they refuse to engage with that, etc., etc., that is taken into account. Asking for support or extension work if required, and generally in class organisation as required. For example, folder organisation, bringing in appropriate materials, that sort of thing. Now, to be clear, SEND and additional needs is very much taken into account when deciding attitude to learning. I want to be clear that if your child has SEND, that means that it's unlikely their folder will be organised. That doesn't mean that if their folder is not organised, they're not going to get a good attitude to learning. Teachers have all got the IEPs, the support plans for students with SEND, and that will be taken into account. So if you're sat there thinking, well, that list is really unfair because my child's additional needs means they just cannot do all those things, then don't panic at all. So that is what attitude to learning is. Now, attitude to learning is graded from 4 to 1. Now, 4, if a child gets 4, that's absolutely awesome, going above and beyond in that subject. So for context, getting an ATL of 4 is rare. It's not completely rare. Students get 4s at every progress check, but that's not where the majority of grading lies. In order to get a 4, students need to go above and beyond, and that's absolutely clear. If a student does exactly what's required of them, they will not get a 4. They have to show that they're going above and beyond. Getting a 3 is exactly what's expected of them. They're doing what they need to do. They're doing the work. They're doing a basic level of independent study, but they're not going above and beyond. 2 means they are not fulfilling expectations. So there's something about the things that are expected of them that they are not fulfilling. For your information, almost all attitude to learning sit at a 3 or a 4. If they're on the 3 side, it means they're doing really well. They're doing what they need to do. And if they're on the 2 side, it means they're not. And the 4 and the 1 are the extremes, and as you'd imagine, that is rarer. Now, a 1, if a student gets an ATL of a 1, there is a serious problem. That genuinely is rare. I think last academic year there were 4 given across the whole year. So attitude to learnings of 4 are rare because students have to go above and beyond, but we have students time and time again who absolutely do. If a student gets an attitude of a learning of a 1 in a lesson, I really, really strongly recommend that you contact their teacher and have a conversation about why that has been given. That is definitely not something we see very frequently, and it means that there's definitely a conversation that needs to take place. Year 13 parents, because you've got parents' evening coming up on the 1st of December, that's a really good time for that conversation. Year 12 parents, your parents' evening isn't until next term. So if your child has got an attitude to learning for 1 in one of their subjects, then please contact that subject teacher straight away. Hopefully the subject teacher would contact you as well to have that conversation, but if they don't, please just get in touch with them. So that hopefully puts a bit more context around what attitude to learning means. So the next thing you will see on your child's progress check is their attendance. You'll see 2 different attendance figures. One is their overall attendance. That is literally the how much of the time they are in school at any what percentage of their time they're in school at any one point. So this takes into account punctuality. If students are frequently late, even if they are in every lesson, their attendance will not be 100%. And that's just the overall attendance percentage for you to know. And the other thing is attendance to mentor period. Something that often we find is that attendance to mentor period slips. Students come in every day, they're in the morning lessons, they're in the afternoon lessons, but they rock in half an hour late. Now, attendance period is incredibly important. Students don't always see the value of it, but the things we do in mentor period are we do PSHRE, we do religious studies, we cover the statutory religious studies requirement, which is set by the national curriculum, but actually, we believe that's really important. Finham Park School is an incredibly multicultural school. It's an incredible, Coventry is a multicultural place with students of lots of different religions. We believe strongly our students should be learning that content. We do things about gender, about sexual harassment. We do study skills. We do lots and lots of different things. And we believe it is incredibly important that students attend mentor period. Moreover, students throughout their mentor period get a huge amount of support in terms of, firstly, mentoring. They get one-to-ones, but secondly, in terms of things like preparing for their next steps, their mentor will write their reference And so it's really, really important that they are in mentor period. So separately, you will have a figure of attendance to mentor period so that you can see if your child is frequently being late and frequently not engaging with that provision. For information, things like work experience don't affect attendance. If a student does work experience either as a one-off or regularly, that will count as them having attended. And students should aim overall for 95% attendance. However, it is worth acknowledging that because we're so early in the academic year, there haven't been that many days. Each day off represents around 3%. So realistically, if their attendance is a bit lower, that might be one legitimate period of illness. By the way, if you see your child's progress check and you have any questions about the attendance, please contact Mrs. Wright. You will have her contact details from the bulletin. She manages our attendance and she can give you a bit more detail around that. So on your child's progress check, every child will have a target grade. Target grades are set by something called L3VA. That stands for Level 3 Value Added and is a government measure. Basically, it's a big algorithm that pops GCSE outcomes in and churns out target grades. Every school gets provided with these. This is a national thing that happens at post 16, and it's what all of the accountability measures in the summer get based on. However, we then look at each target on a case-by-case basis and make tweaks if needed. If your child has SEND or whatever, it's very likely that that conversation will involve them. But generally, actually, L3VA is quite a good system. The targets do come out looking quite sensible generally. If you've got any questions about your child's target, then absolutely do contact me and we can have that conversation. So now I'm going to show you a year 13 progress check first, and I'm going to talk you through it. Then I'm going to show you the new look year 12 progress check. So you're all going to have to bear with me for a second for the year group that's not your own, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. So this is what a year 13 progress check will look like. I've included two pictures. The top picture is a version of a progress check that you will get now. The next one is later in the academic year because you can see it's got arrows on it. So firstly, I'm going to talk you through the key. The key's at the bottom of the page. The grey shaded blocks represent the target grades. We've just spoken about those. The dot represents the working at grade. If the dot is green, it means the child is at or above their target. Amber, they're within 2 grades of their target, and red means they're more than 2 grades from their target. That is because, on average, we would imagine that across the 2 years, the student will make that amount of progress. To be clear, these are end of year 13 targets, so final target grades. So if you look at the top progress check, you can see the subjects are along the left-hand side, and next you've got the attitude to learning. So this student here has got attitude to learning predominantly of 3s with 1 4. Then the grades are separated into E minus, E plus, etc. Basically, an E is all really one thing. If a student is on a minus, it means they're just into that grade. If they're on a plus, they're nearly into the next one. But basically, you can look at the grades as big blocks. I wouldn't worry too much about the subgrades, particularly not at post 16. And so you can see if you look at the top progress check, all of this student's progress checks are A grades. In the top 2, they're maybe towards the bottom end of an A, but the bottom 2, they're right in the middle of an A, and then their target grades are all A stars. And then the bottom one, you can see the arrow. So this is a later progress check. You'd expect to see the arrows on a progress check later in the year because it shows whether the student has moved up or down in terms of working at grade from a previous progress check. So if there's an arrow heading left, that means that their previous progress check was higher. So that's maybe a conversation to have with them about their working at grade and why it is there. So that's the year 13 progress checks. The year 12 progress check, I'm going to put up on the screen now. And the reason I'm going to do that is because actually there are some relevant conversations that relate to the year 13 progress check and might answer some questions. So I became head of sixth form a year ago and a few weeks, and I picked up that the progress checks in year 13 are a little bit inconsistent in terms of how they're graded. Some subjects grade students as how they would do if they were doing the exam now, meaning the grades tend to be much lower because right now you absolutely would not expect a student to get an A in an exam now. And some subjects were grading them as if they were getting a final outcome. And so the progress checks are a little bit inconsistent in year 13. We've ironed that out, And so the progress checks you get this year should be fairly consistent. But moving forward into year 12, we've designed a new look progress check, which takes both into account. And this is really why I wanted to have this conversation with you all today. So this is a new look year 12 progress check, and you will notice, in fact, I'm just going to talk through it, but you will notice a student is issued with 3 grades, a target grade, a working out grade, and a course grade. So the target grade we've already talked about in great detail. That is the end of year 13 target. So that gives the students now an idea of what they should be working towards over the 2 years. A working out grade is a grade that is only on the work they have done so far. And we've done some really, really clever data and inputting stuff into spreadsheets. Sorry, excuse me, I'm plugging my laptop in. And plugging things into spreadsheets and lots of clever things to make sure that at this stage of year 12, students have probably done 2 assessments. Based on those 2 assessments, how have they done? So only based on the content they have already covered, what grade are they coming out with? So you can see this student in biology on their 2 assessments so far is averaging an A. However, in chemistry, obviously they're finding that a lot harder. They're averaging an E. So the working out grade is that. We've got to be realistic at this stage in year 12. They've only covered a really small proportion of the content, and more importantly, much more importantly, an easy bit of the content. The content at A level gets much harder, and so we need to be really realistic that if they're working at an A now, that does not mean that will stay at an A or an A star. It might do, but we do see trends in which those working at grades go down as well as up as students tackle the more challenging content. A course grade, on the other hand, is an indication of if they took their final exam today, what would they get? And we've ummed and ahed for a really long time about whether to put this on, and we've decided to, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So the course grade over the 2 years will start really low and will grow as a progress trajectory. And the reason that we've decided to put this on at this stage is so that students can genuinely see that progress grow over the 2 years. Now, the reason I wanted to have this meeting is the course grade, and I want to really reassure everyone, and for your information, I'm doing an assembly about this for year 12 as well, so they will understand that and they will get the same info, but I don't want any confusion. The course grades will all be U's and E's at this stage. You would not expect a student, if a student can sit an A-level exam now and come out with an A, they need to be at university. So all the students will be low grades at their course grade, and over the next 2 years, you will see that grade grow to show really clear progress, whereas the working out grade is likely to stay the same, wobble up and down, or might go down. And the reason for including both pieces of information is even though when students first see this, it is likely to be a bit of a shock to see those lower grades on the course grade, we are really hopeful it will actually give a really accurate picture of where a student is at so that you can have very, very powerful conversations. Also, it's such a clear directive to our staff. The grading in every subject should be very consistent. And then on the end, you can see the attitude to learning, which we've talked about. And I hope that makes absolute sense. So flicking back to the year 13 progress check, what you have got effectively here is just the working out grade. So you have got to take into account that this grade is where the student is based on the material they've done. It does not take into account that in year 13, they've actually got lots and lots of much harder material to come. So there is a risk that that grade might go up or down, and we've got to be really aware of that. So that's what the progress checks will look like. Hopefully that gives you a really good indication of how to read them and which bits will show the progress and how that will look like. The next thing to introduce you to, now year 13 parents should be aware of this, year 12 parents probably don't know anything about this, is home study status. So as you know, and I hope we were really, really explicit about this during the application process, in year 12 students are expected to be on site full time. There are lots of reasons for that. I'm not going to go into it now, but if you want a conversation about it, I'm happy to talk about it at another time. But we absolutely believe in that as a principle, and we insist on it. In year 13, some students are allowed to go home in the afternoons of their study time. They're not allowed to go home in the mornings. That's for 2 reasons. One is we think the mental period is important for the reasons I've already outlined. And secondly, if students go home in the mornings and the afternoons, we never see them. So we just can't keep an eye on them and we end up losing them. Finham has a really nice family feel, and it is important that students are in to experience that. So much intervention and support just happens round about where you catch a student in the corridor. So in year 13, if students meet certain criteria, then they are able to have home study status. And the reason we're telling you this now, and the reason that you will have a table, year 12 parents, on the progress check looking like this left one, is so that you can see where a student is in comparison to the criteria they'll be required to meet. So at the end of year 12, we will have a look at students' overall attendance throughout year 12, attendance to mentor period throughout year 12, and their average ATL. And if they've met the targets you can see on this table, so 95% attendance, 95% attendance to mentor, and an average ATL of 3.3, then they will be given that home study status. That means in year 13, they can go home in the afternoons if they choose to. We're not forcing anyone to go home. Everybody is welcome on our site, but they can choose to do that. That will then be reviewed in every progress check. You've probably noticed that the targets on the year 13 progress check are a little bit lower. The reason for that is we give students another chance. So at the start of year 13, if their attendance has been poor in year 12, that does not mean they can't have home study. At the first progress check, the one that was released yesterday, they've had a fresh start from the start of the year. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, 1 day off is about 3% at the moment. And so if a student has had one very genuine illness, that would take them below the home study threshold. So for this progress check only, in recognition of that, I don't want students dragging themselves in if they're genuinely ill. We've dropped that target to 91% lesson attendance, 91 attendance to mentor period, and that will grow back up throughout the year. So the next progress check is probably going to be 93%, and then the end of year will be 95%, so that it's really, really fair. This student here, you can see, has met the attendance criteria, not the attitude to learning, and so doesn't have that home study, but we'll have a check-in with their mentor to talk about what they need to do differently if they want home study in future. The reason that I always get the question of, do you include grading in this? No, I don't. I don't look at distance from target. The reason for that is I want everyone to be able to have home study status. I want this to be something that's completely attainable. And if you look at attainment or progress, there will always be some students who will or won't be able to access it. And we want to be as inclusive as possible. And so everybody has control over these things. The other thing in terms of inclusivity, to let you know, you can see it on the bottom of the screen, is that in year 13, we have 162 students in the year group and 84 have got home study status. That shows that this is really, really attainable. The other thing we find is it's a great motivator. It's a great motivator for attendance. It's also a great motivator for attitude to learning. Since we brought this system in at the end of last year, as a year 13 and year 12 maths teacher, I have never had more students having conversations with me saying, I really want a 4 for my ATL. What can I do? Can I show you this extra work? And so that's been very, very powerful. But we acknowledge that there are some students, for medical reasons or SEND reasons or whatever it is, need that home study status in year 13 because of personal circumstances. And so 7 students have got home study in year 13 for medical or SEND reasons, and we've got evidence for all of that on file. And so if your child desperately needs home study for a really, really legitimate medical reason, if you bring us some evidence of that, and I'm sorry we have to ask for evidence, but sadly we've been lied to in the past, and we can get audited, so we just need to make sure our paperwork's in place, then we absolutely will be inclusive and accommodate that. So year 12 parents, you will have this box on the progress check. You will notice the criteria all says NA because they don't get home study status at this stage, but we want you to see where they're at because all of the stuff this year will prepare for year 13. Year 13, you'll get a table like that on the right hand side. That shouldn't be a surprise because you received one last year as well. So year 13, a quick couple of notices for you while I've got your listening ear. On the 1st of December, that is the parents' evening, you should have received a letter about this a couple of weeks ago. For your information and a reminder, the booking system opens to parents tomorrow morning at 9 AM. It can be a bit of a scrabble, and so especially if you have time constraints, I recommend you log on as soon as you can tomorrow. Another reminder for year 13 parents, in January, students will have study leave for a week during their mock examinations. So in that first week back, starting on the Wednesday, I think it's the 4th of January, I want to say, they're in for exams only. They're welcome to use the study facilities in school, but lessons will not be running. And there has been a recent letter about that. But just in case anyone's missed it, I thought that would be a relevant reminder. And just to finish up, if you have any questions, I will take them now in the chat. Because of the focus of this meeting, please keep questions relevant to progress checks, reports or assessments. If you have any wider queries, then either please email me or your child's mentor. And that's about all the information, and I really hope it was helpful. Just going to check the chat to see if there's any questions. Kirsty Kift, I've just seen your question. If your son has an unauthorized absence because of an issue with a teacher, then just contact Mrs. Wright to confirm what happened and she will change it. Her email address is on the bulletin. In fact, I'll type her email address in the chat in case anyone has got specific. Right, so that's the specific email. So for year 13 students, at what point do provisional grades be allocated? Do you mean predicted grades? If you mean predicted grades, they were allocated in September. So students receive a progress check in September that has their predicted grades on. There's then an appeals process. So same question, the predicted grades, they are received, so students don't apply for year 13 in year 12. Sorry, I'm messing up the questions. I've had two questions about university admissions and grades. Students do not apply to university in year 12. Students apply for university at the start of year 13. In September of year 13, students will receive their predicted grades. That will take into account everything they have done throughout year 12. Once they've received those predicted grades, there's an appeals process and the students can appeal those grades. It's an evidence-based appeal and some of them do change. The question about the Wi-Fi, yes. Can you ask your daughter to come and see us and we'll send her up to IT to make sure that gets resolved? IT have spoken to us in the last day or two saying that there are one or two settings they can tweak on their laptops to make the Wi-Fi easier. So just send your daughter to come and speak to either me or her mentor and we'll sort out the Wi-Fi. Okay, if there are any further questions, I'll hover for a couple of minutes. Please type them on the chat. Other than that, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it and I hope that that was useful. Oh, value, hang on, I'll go back to that. This is Laura Macera, this is your response. So value is what the student has achieved. So if you look at the slide at the moment, the target column is what students are aiming for. So the target for overall attendance is 95% and value is what this particular student has achieved, which is 97.62%. So the predicted grade and the progress check are two completely different things. This is Syed Sharif, this is an answer for you. So firstly, the predicted grade, that won't be a correction, that will be an amendment after the appeals process. So that will have been a successful appeal. The progress check that was sent out yesterday, that is current progress in the classroom. That is different to a predicted grade. A predicted grade is what we think the child will get at the end of the year, so in several months' time. And that is the one that should be considered for the university application. Does that make sense? Cool, right. There aren't any more questions on the chat, I don't think. I'll stay on the call for a minute, but I'm going to mute and turn my camera off. Have a lovely evening, everybody.